what have you seen that's working really well for people right now that are developing strong brands around professional speaking?
Yeah. So I would say everybody will have to, for any career you choose, being good at speaking will grow you tremendously as far as having success and results. The next level up is to be paid to be a speaker, which means I am identifying a professional skill, right? And I always say the difference between a hobby and a hustle is a check. And so if you're saying I want to be a professional speaker, means I want someone to pay me to speak and open my mouth. Now, when that comes to be, and there's most coaches will tell you in the speaking arena, there are four main types of speakers: inspirational, motivational, informational, and then transformational. And so you want to understand, if I do want to be a speaker, which type of speaker do I want to be? And what are the markets and events I want to attend? Now, one of the best things that helped my speaking career to get me to 5-figure speaking contracts was really going to more events, going to more conferences, and getting more comfortable talking to people. Because people think, I've stood in front of crowds of thousands of people. That you work your way there. I didn't start there. I first got up in front of rooms of 50 and rooms of 100 and rooms of 300 and rooms of 500 and rooms of 1,000. And so I would say get started is one of the most critical parts, and own where you are strong and own where you want to grow. And it's the most important part for me that's been helpful is studying myself, listening to when I'm talking too fast so that I create what's your structure when you are excited and you do naturally speed up. How can you work on that to manage yourself so in those moments, people still are able to get impact? And so I really studied great speakers, and then also understanding the business of speaking. So I also studied great speaking contracts, and I asked all my speaker friends, hey, can you let me see your contract? And I've learned so much to get a better contract for myself that better protects me. But absolutely, we're in a time of such major disruption. We need powerful people to step up and speak up. And so it's an incredible opportunity that is there. And I would say get started, but really it goes back to the first question earlier: your authority, your expectations, and your assets. So foundational for me, the more I've organized and refined my message, the bigger stages I've gotten as a speaker. And so many of my bigger platform opportunities, from TD Jakes conference to Steve Harvey's conference, I pitched them and I sent clear keynotes. And for both of those opportunities, they just picked a keynote out of my speaker's deck. And that's what I went on that stage and talked about. And so I would say, don't wait for the big dogs to come to your door, go knock, and don't be afraid to show up and send your stuff.
And how did you find those people? Like, when you're looking at a conference like a TD Jakes or a Steve Harvey conference, I mean, they're not the ones that are doing the work of planning and selecting
Yeah.
speakers, right? Like they got a staff of people. And how did you identify, who was the right person to actually send that pitch to?
So I leveraged who I did know to get to who I didn't know.
Hmm.
And so for both, I would start, hey, and there are a couple of ways, right? So I knew people who knew people, and I asked people I know to connect me, and I stayed in touch. So you can definitely, by going, and also I had attended events for both in those communities before I spoke on those platforms. And so don't be, if you want to speak on a certain conference, you'll be much less nervous if you go to the conference as an attendee before you try to go speak. And so I would say, show up, go into really invest, and you can write it off as a business expense because you're in market research. And then another thing that a gangster thing, and usually I pay people for this tip, but I'll tell you, is that I know the speakers who are a steps ahead of me who I want to one day be. So I have a list that my manager goes through, and she looks at, okay, here are the other speakers who mentor me. Where did they speak last year? And I study their speaking list. So we Google and study where they've already spoken, because we know those are events that pay. And then we pitch me for those events. I also I live in Atlanta. There's a lot of events here. We look at some of the larger venues here. We'll look at their calendar. We look probably about 2 to 3 months at close, because usually within the last 90 days, a lot of conferences have firmed up speakers, but you can look and see what are some of the places you want to visit. I have a list of places I haven't visited that I want to go. And I look at events in those areas and I Google my subject matter expert or expertise and conferences in different cities. And I'll say, oh, I should pitch this conference. And I pitch. All they can say is no, but that's part of owning my authority, expanding my expectations, organizing my assets. And that's just the first half of our seen and paid system. But it's just so if you just do those three things right, it will put you ahead of 90% of the market, because most people don't slow down enough to actually get grounded and build up.